All right, lesson 10 of Unit 4, Functions Practice. We're going to get some real experience with functions today. Jumping right into the activity, we're going to start on code.org, lesson 10, bubble 2 on Code Studio. So let's go there now. And what you see is just a little bit of code, only 22 lines, and most of them are spaces. So it says the functions are not called in the correct order. Rearrange the function calls to correctly tell the story. So if you look here, you've got all your function calls, and you can tell that these are functions because they have that open and end parentheses in the end. And then you can look down below and you can see each of those functions. Here's the one for spring, for summer, autumn, winter. If you needed to run this program to tell which one goes in what order, you could do that, or you could just deduce it by looking at that first line. So we're assuming that we are actually writing these in the order that they belong in. All you're going to need to do here is just actually rearrange. So moving that one down there and moving this one right there. Whoops. Thank goodness for Control Z. And if you want to get rid of some spaces. Okay, that's all you're doing. And then if you want to check that and run it and see what happens in the console log, first comes spring when flowers bloom, summer sun will follow soon, autumn crackles red and gold, then hibernate for winter's cold. So it's a poem. It makes sense. Moving on to bubble 3. All right, I'm going to start giving you some more freedom to actually do these on your own. And then I'm just going to pop back on here anytime I feel like there's something that we need to make sure that you understand before we move on. So on bubble 3, this program is going to draw a building in the debug console. And you can see over here to the right what that is supposed to look like. And it wants you to add code to the program to draw at least 3 more floors to the building. So you're going to want to look at the example over here, and you're going to want to analyze the code and see what exactly is happening, what's going on within each function, what function is being called and in what order. And then if you were going to add 3 more floors to the building, how would you do that? Pause me, do that, and then I'll rejoin you after. And moving on to bubble 4. On this one, one thing to note, new information, is that we have to spell function names the same way when you declare them and call them. So it's got to be exactly the same. And function names follow the same rules as variables. They have to begin with a letter and there can be no spaces. So you probably noticed that that's the way we're writing things anyway. And so what you're going to be doing in this one is to run the program and look at all the error messages. It looks like there's just 2 right now. So you are going to debug the code to remove the errors. And I believe that you can figure that out on your own. If not, let me know and I will help you. Then you're going to call the function by Apple enough times that you get a message in the console log saying you have run out of money. So you're going to need to look through the code just a little bit. There's not a lot here to figure out what exactly is in the by Apple function and what would I have to do in order to run out of money. And just a note that you cannot switch to block mode, and you already know that, I think. You cannot go to block mode as long as you have an error. But as soon as you get rid of the error, you can move to block mode if that is more comfortable for you. Go ahead and do that, and I will see you in bubble 5. On bubble 5, this program is starting out with an update screen function that is declared here down at the bottom. Here's your function. of all the things that it will do to update the screen. But the problem is that it's not called anywhere in the program. So you set up your function and tell it that whenever I say so, here's what you're going to do. But then if you never say so, it never does it, right? So you got to, first of all, read the code, make sure you understand how it works, and then add calls to the update screen functions. You can find that on the functions tab, and you will just use this one right here to actually plug it in wherever you want. And then you just have to change the name of it to your function name, just like that. That's all you have to do. But what you're looking for is that you want the update screen function to make the face and text on the screen respond to the changes in the value stored in the thumbs up variable. So let's look for where the thumbs up variable is currently. We've created it right here, current value 5. When someone clicks the down button, the thumbs up variable becomes =1. When someone clicks the thumbs up button, the thumbs up variable adds 1. And so, and it says here in the comments, add code to update the screen after each of those on events happen. So, hint, hint, that's probably where you're going to want your update screen function to be called. And then you might look through and just double check that there's nowhere else that you would need it. Moving on. When you're ready to bubble 6, feel free to pause me as many times as you need to. And a reminder, if you're ever using the same pieces of code over and over, you should declare a function once at the bottom of your program and then call it in your program every time that you need to use it. So what you're going to do on bubble 6, getting a little bit more complicated, rewrite this program to use functions rather than repeated code. Read the program, and here's the strategy. Read through the program and identify what has been repeated, and then use that to put into your function handler, we'll call it. And then replace those repeated blocks of code with calls to your functions. So go ahead and work on that, and I'll come back in when you're done and give you a couple tips. So make sure that you have taken the time to try this out yourself and try to figure it out yourself before you try to get any answers from me. The important thing with coding is that you understand what you're doing at every little step of the way. And that's why the lessons are structured the way they are, to really get you a taste of it and then a little bit of experience with it, a little more experience with it, and then being able to actually use it functionally. So, I will just give you a hint that it is, as you're starting out with functions, it is helpful if you actually drag these blocks over, and that way you can save yourself some unnecessary headache of errors and warnings from missing out on a parenthesis or a semicolon or whatever. So whatever you chose to call your function, just make sure that you are using the correct syntax, that you are starting with a letter and that you have no spaces. And common with JavaScript is that we are capitalizing the second word if you are using 2 words. So just to make sure that you did everything correctly, look through your console log and make sure that it is giving you the same information on every single day of this cat's exciting diary. All right, bubble 7. So we're just going to learn a little bit on this bubble. We're talking about variables again and how we're going to be able to use them in conjunction with our functions. So you got to remember a couple things. You use the word var only once when you're creating the variable. Any other time you're talking about the variable, you're just going to give the name of the variable. You don't need to create variables twice. Obviously, that's going to give you some errors. You need to create variables only at the top of your program. So variables go on the top, functions go on the bottom. And this just helps to keep your code organized and easier to read for you and others. You're going to create your variables outside of any function or on event blocks. And this goes back to our concept of the difference between global and local variables. A global variable is something that you want to use anywhere in your code. If you call it at the beginning of your program, you can call it inside, or you can you can use it inside of an on event, inside of a function, inside another on event, and you're doing all kinds of different things with the variables. You're replacing the value of what's inside that baggie at different times, depending on whatever you need it for. That is what you're primarily going to be using. And here's an example of what that looks like. Here's where you're creating the variable at the very beginning of your program outside of the on event. And then inside the on event, you're just updating the value of the variable. A local variable is something that you are only using inside of that little block of code. So if you wanted to create a variable called clicks inside the on event, that means you are only going to be able to use that variable or update the value of that variable inside the on event. You can't later call it in a function. It doesn't exist outside of that on event. Okay, I think that's enough about variables. So bubble 8, this program should buy an apple every time the apple is clicked, but it doesn't seem to be working. So you want to run the code, see how it works, look through the code line by line. There's not that much of it in slow-mo if you want to make sure that you see what is happening. And then you're going to debug the scope issue so that it runs correctly. Anytime you're hearing the word scope, you're thinking about global versus local variables. So go ahead and do that and then move on with me. All right, on Bubble 9, we're learning just a little bit more information about how to best use functions. So this is kind of a guideline as far as the answer to the question, when should I make a function? So there's something called never, after, during, before that is kind of like the progression of how you can mature as a programmer. And as you move up that ladder, you're going to feel better and more confident about your abilities. So what we've done previously, previous to learning about functions at all, is we were never creating functions. So that's where we were. Hopefully none of us are there anymore. Throughout the practice that we've been doing is that we are creating the functions after we've written the code. So we've already written the code, we're going through it and looking for ways that are places that are repeating code, and then we're going back and replacing those with a function. And that may be where you're at for a little while. Eventually, you'll move to being a coder who thinks about the functions while you're writing the code. Maybe the second time you start repeating yourself, you think, I should use a function for this. And so that's kind of the next stage that you guys will be in. And then eventually, and hopefully sooner rather than later, but whatever, you'll be writing the functions before, or at least thinking about what you might actually use for a function, what might need a function when I'm getting ready to make this app. So none of these are wrong. It's just a natural progression, and just wanted you to be aware of the differences there. So Bubble 10 is going to give you just a little bit more of a challenge. This program keeps track of tickets purchased for a performance. One of the buttons already has working code inside of it, and you can scroll down here and see it even tells you this button already works. It's the adult button. The other two buttons will work very similarly. Rather than write repeated code, however, practice creating an update screen function that you can call inside each on event. So update screen is a kind of a generic function name that you can use a lot of times on an app, right? Every time something happens, you want to update the screen and therefore update the information that's on that screen, whether it's adding an amount to a ticket price or adding points to a game, you're still updating the screen. So what you want is to create an update screen function. What else does it tell you to do? Decide which lines of code need to be in that update screen function, which ones are going to need to happen no matter which button is clicked, the adult, child, or senior. And then you want to make sure that you declare update screen function at the bottom of your code. And then add the code, call the code or call the function inside your child and your senior sections of code. So make sure that they increase the total number of tickets sold and the total money collected. Those two things definitely need to be in your update screen function. And then call it when necessary. And I'm going to just let you guys at that. And if you have any issues with it, certainly let me know. If you need help debugging, we can do Zoom call, talk to me, email me, copy paste your code, send it to me or a friend. And then the last thing to do today on Google Classroom is there is a couple of closing questions just to make sure that you really understood today's material and to prepare you for the upcoming unit test. And tomorrow will be the functions make.